I've got a standard diameter, small diameter, and micro diameter arrow, and I want to see which of these three penetrate best, and if the small diameter and micro diameter arrows are worth the extra in cost over the standard diameter arrow. If you've never been here before, my name is Trent, and I appreciate you coming to watch this video. If you have been here before, I appreciate you coming back. So I'm gonna do this really easily. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna break down costs to build a dozen of each of these arrows. Then I'm going to do some math to calculate the outside surface area of these arrows, because the surface area is what's gonna be a big deal in the penetration. Then, after I compare all of those things, I'm gonna shoot each one of them into ballistics gel, and I want to see which one penetrates the best. Now, just a couple things you need to know about these arrows before we dig into this. They are all within 1 grain weight of each other. You can see that on the scale now. The 245 is a 350 spine. The 204 and the 166 are 300 spine, and the reason I did that is so I can keep them within weight tolerance of one another. However, they all tune and shoot fine out of my bow. I have double checked that to make sure. All of the arrows will be launched out of my Sanlita Dragon X8. This is set at 29 inches at 70 pounds. No idea what the arrow speed is. All three of these arrows have the exact same field tip. Now you're going to notice a difference in the inserts. That's just because it's what I had to do. This is a insert-outsert system. This is a true insert, and this is a half out. That's just what I had to do to make this work. And I finished using the insert systems to make the weight as close as physically possible. So I put these arrows on as even keel as possible before I started this. Now let's get to the mathematical calculations. So let's talk about cost. In looking at cost for this video, I looked at two places. I looked at Amazon and I looked at blackovis.com. And I wanted to compare costs for just arrow shafts and then for a fully built arrow. So we'll start with the Sport, the V-Force, the 245 standard, this guy. I found those on Amazon for $69.99 for just a dozen shafts. So if you can build arrows yourself, all you need is the shafts. The total cost to have a dozen built for you is $121.99. Now, you can't get these built from Amazon. So what you would have to do is you'd have to order 2 half dozens of fletch shafts and then take them somewhere to get them cut and have inserts installed. And that's why my total cost comes to $121.98 for that. And it comes out to $10.16 an arrow. And that's an approximate cost because every shop is going to charge you a little different to cut and install. For the 204, this actually surprised me because the 204 was more expensive than the 166. And I'll tell you another thing. I couldn't find the Victory Rip exact, so I was using a ripped TKO, and it's a gamer, so it's 0.003 straightness, not 0.006. But it's $164.99 for a dozen of those through Black Ovis, and then to get them fully customized, decked out, built how you want. Your choice fletchings, the whole nine, cut to your length, insert glued in. Basically they're gonna be shipped to you ready to shoot. Total cost is $187.99, and that's without shipping or tax or any of that. $15.67 an arrow. And then for the micro diameter guys, I found the VAPs. Black Ovis did have the VAP just like this. $144.99 for a dozen shafts. And then decked out, shipped to you how you want, you know, ready to shoot, $167.99, and that comes out to $14 an arrow, basically. So none of these are necessarily cheap, but I would say they're about on par with anything you would find equivalent. So I went ahead and calculated the surface area of each arrow after I found the cost for each arrow. And the surface area calculation, all I did is calculated carbon to carbon, so it's not perfect because I didn't include the insert or the fletchings or any of that, but I calculated the carbon to carbon length of the arrow and just used surface area of a cylinder. For the micro diameter, I got 15.81 inches of surface area. I got, for the 204, 18.33, and for the 245, I got 22.93 inches of surface area. So as expected, the larger diameter arrow has more surface area. The reason I wanted to bring this up and why it's important is because in a wind drift scenario, something with more surface area is going to be blown around more. Now, that's not 100% true because these are cylindrical. If they had flat edges, that would be a little different, but these don't. These are cylindrical. So there's more going on there, and honestly, there's some physics to calculate all that that's just way, way above my head. So I'm not going there in this video. From this angle, it looks like they got about identical penetration, but when we put a tape measure to them, we'll know for sure. So after shooting into the gel there, I marked each arrow with a silver Sharpie at the ballistics gel, and I took them out and I measured where each individual, or how deep each individual arrow penetrated. I've got the numbers written down so I can remember them. The standard diameter arrow penetrated 9 9/16 inches. The 204 diameter arrow penetrated 10 3/8 inches. And the micro diameter arrow penetrated 10 7/16 inches. So what's this all really mean? Well, the test showed me a few things. First, it showed me that a small diameter arrow and a micro diameter arrow are gonna out-penetrate a standard diameter arrow. But in this test, the micro diameter didn't really out-penetrate the standard, or the small diameter arrow. It did, but just barely. And I think the ballistics gel is to blame here. So a standard diameter arrow is the same diameter all the way around, all the way down the arrow shaft. So when it hits that ballistics gel, friction happens immediately, and that stops the arrow quickly. With the small diameter and the micro diameter arrows, the insert is a bigger diameter than the arrow itself. So what happens is there's a slight cavitation in the ballistics gel that the arrow follows behind. But because the gel sucks back in on itself so quick, the friction happens about equivalent for both shafts, and that's why you only saw a little bit more penetration out of the micro diameter. So to me, that means that it is worth the bump up to go from a standard diameter arrow to at least a small diameter, if not a micro. And in this particular test, because of cost, it makes more sense to just go to the micro diameter. Even if it's just sort of slight bit more penetration over the small, it is more penetration, and they're cheaper overall, especially getting them custom built like I had mentioned. So to me, this test showed that a micro diameter arrow is worth it. Now, only you can determine if it's worth it for your budget. You know, by no means am I telling you to spend outside your budget, but if you have, you know, a $200 arrow budget, go with the micros in this circumstance, save you some extra money, and still get great penetrating arrows that are going to perform awesome. As always, guys, I appreciate you watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.